Hi everyone, my name is RubyPanda, and welcome to my first case review video. In this series, I want to take a deep dive look into a single sinner, explaining all of their core mechanics, synergies and strategies. If there's a sinner you would like to see featured, please let me know, but for this first episode, we'll be featuring one of my favorite units, Luvia.
Whoa! You hear that? That's quite dangerous!
Luvia is an A-rank arcane sinner, who specializes in doing magical burst DPS, but can also slide into a more supportive role if need be. Her investment level is high, wanting at the very least her skills 1 and 3 at level 7, in addition to her exclusive Crimebrand unlocked. Finally, her difficulty rating is 5 out of 5, as she's one of the most difficult to utilize sinners we have available, due to her overload state and her reliance on animation cancelling for maximum damage output. Luvia's skill 1, also known as the normal attacks, is two-way lightning. Depending on which personality is currently in control, the properties of their attacks change. While Luvia is in control, her attacks send out a ball of lightning which jumps to another target, making her excellent for dealing with waves of enemies. Rei, on the other hand, gets a slightly extended range and specializes in single target damage. This makes her great for dealing with bosses and high priority targets. Upgrading this skill scales the damage. Switching the personalities is done through her fast charging ultimate, Photoelectric Switch. The ultimate costs 6 energy to use and also gives both Luvia and Rei bonus attack speed passively. Upgrading her ultimate gives them more attack speed. Next, her skill 3 is Lightning Strike. Anytime Luvia and Rei have hit 15 enemies, they become overloaded. While overloaded, they get more attack, deal guaranteed critical hits, and apply an electrocution debuff allied sinners can detonate for additional magic damage. Some allied sinners such as Labyrinth and Hecate can even detonate multiple electrocution debuffs with a single ultimate. Electrocution stacks can also be tracked on an enemy's health bar as a little claw symbol. Keep in mind, Luvia's lightning ball attack can hit 2 enemies, meaning she can send you into overload faster than Rei. Increasing skill levels on Lightning Strike increases the attack bonus you get while overloaded. Her final skill, Electric Spark, grants Luvia and Rei additional attack speed stacking with the number of times they've been overloaded, to a maximum of 3 stacks. Upgrading this skill increases the attack speed gained. The generally preferred skill priority for Luvia is 1, 3, 2, 4, due to her DPS being so strongly reliant on her normal attacks and her overloaded state. As I mentioned in the beginning, her skills 1 and 3 are both high priority skills you definitely want at level 7, however skill 2 and 4 can stay at 1 or be upgraded at a later time. Luvia's exclusive Crimebrand is Thunderstorm. For 10 seconds whenever they perform a normal attack, 2 normal attacks will be dealt instead. This is incredibly powerful as it sends their DPS through the roof, especially when used in conjunction with overload. So make sure to rank this high when deciding which of your A ranks should get their ECB unlocked. Her most important shackle is Shackle 4. Granting her overload at the start of the battle immediately feeds her 1 stack of Electric Spark, but also allows her to become an excellent wave clearer for broken frontline. She can still function without the shackle, however just make sure you bring something to cover the wave clear issue, and also a way to ensure that her overload will trigger at the correct timings. The most common set on Luvia is Shackles of Life. Since she deals guaranteed crit damage while overloaded, the additional 50% crit damage from this set provides great synergy. For general purposes, this is her best set by far. Another set which can be run is Embrace of the Dead. This will typically be used if you're using Luvia as the main DPS and don't mind taking this set away from your arena. This set heavily emphasizes Rei's single target damage, and as a result, Luvia's wave clearing capabilities will typically fall short. This set often sees use on Shackled teams where another wave clearer is present, such as Langley, and we have alternative ways of increasing Irene's damage. The last set is one I personally used while building Luvia, since during this time her levels and skills would be low. We can instead lean into her short ultimate timer, running justice on her and making her a somewhat decent team amplifier. I generally don't recommend this set, but I figured it's worthwhile mentioning in case anyone can find some success with it. With this set, we are less concerned about her personal damage, but rather keeping a 100% uptime on Justice. Though in a lot of cases, if this is where you're at, level 1 Joanne is also a valid consideration. For story stages and event stages, Luvia lands herself in the solid T1 position. Her ability to switch between light AoE attacks and heavy single target attacks makes her highly adaptable to any stage she's thrown into. However, while she is a perfectly strong damage dealer who will be able to get you past the stages, the lack of control over her burst makes her somewhat unreliable, though this should only prove like a minor obstacle in good team compositions. For broken frontline, however, she places herself comfortably in T0. As long as her exclusive Crimebrand is unlocked, when used in conjunction with Irene, she's able to guarantee 240k on high risk Shackled, no matter the buffs, since Luvia can function as the main DPS using Last Stand on weeks Irene gets no love. However, keep in mind her tiers are considering optimal play. In terms of difficulty, Luvia Ray is one of the most difficult sinners we have available. She is the true queen, forcing you to cater to her every need and tempo. Your broken frontline runs will be made, or broken, by how well you can line up her overload timeline, forcing you to pay extra attention to the number of attacks your Luvia is doing, and switching to Ray at just the right time to become overloaded for the boss core break. But that's not all. Ray still requires even more attention as you consistently animation cancel her attacks in order to reach the ceiling of her damage. And trust me, it's a high ceiling. When activating her exclusive Crimebrand, the damage will become incomparable. You can naturally opt not to animation cancel, but it's highly recommended you do so, as the damage difference is substantial. If you're looking to improve your brand score, Luvia is not the sinner you should be looking at. Her highly magic focused damage plays right into Brand's S tier magic resistance, making Luvia essentially hit for no damage at all. If you're truly desperate, and I mean truly, and already have Luvia built, you can try using her as a wave clear for waves 1 and 2 by making use of her Shackle 4 and exclusive Crimebrand. Use Thunderstorm immediately upon enemy contact and make use of your guaranteed crits to deal with the early waves. So to summarize, don't use it for Brand. The S tier defense is just too much for her to handle as she doesn't really bring anything else other than the damage. If you're truly desperate, you can try supportive wave clearer with Nox, giving Luvia either Shackles of Life or Justice. Shackled, however, is where Luvia truly shines. With Shackled's lower magic resistance, Luvia can deal crazy amounts of damage, allowing her to become the main DPS in a Last Stand focused composition, or secondary supportive DPS on Empower Irene strategies. Which strategy you employ should largely depend on which buffs are available. In Luvia Ray's case, however, she's not buff dependent at all, which makes her incredibly consistent. However, if granted the chance, picking buffs like Buzz HP, damage to core broken units, and crit damage does wonders for her. Her personal buff isn't great, so I recommend against picking it in most cases. When playing a Last Stand composition, the success of the run hinges on the timeline you set up for your Luvia. Unfortunately, every one of you will be clearing the first 2 waves at different paces, and some of you will even have Luvia at Shackle 4, so I cannot give you guys a cheat code to line this up perfectly every time. Instead, I highly recommend you do a couple of test runs where you pay close attention to the number of attacks she does, and figure out how to line up your overload with the boss break. Alternatively, simply hold off on breaking the boss until you see this visual indicator under your Luvia. And this is something I really want to focus in on. I cannot stress enough how vital the overload timing is for Luvia Ray. I previously mentioned that Shackle 4 is her most important shackle. This is because it puts her in an incredibly advantageous position to construct a good timeline. A Luvia timeline is simply mapping out where during the run Luvia will be overloaded, so let's take a look at how these are commonly constructed. If you're playing with a Luvia with 3 shackles or less, you will have 2 options. First is to clear wave 1 and 2 as fast as possible, making Luvia hit just enough to become overloaded upon boss spawn. This option will require a main wave clearer as Luvia won't be overloaded in the beginning. Here units like Lang Li and the new upcoming Sinner Serpent are very desirable, as they not only provide the wave clear you need, but also fully line up your core breakers for high risk alongside Labyrinth, Hekata and Che. I recommend this option if your Luvia has 2 to 3 shackles. The second option is to hit Luvia's overload twice during the run, which is doable through animation cancelling and good support. In this case, you still want a secondary wave clearer, again Lang Li and Serpent are great choices, as they allow you to thin out the wave as necessary in order for Luvia to hit her overload at the correct timings. I recommend this option if your Luvia has 0 to 1 shackles, as her overload will last 3 seconds longer when Shackle 2, leaving less time to start restacking it. And finally, the optimal way of using a Shackle 4 or higher Luvia is also the most straightforward one. Her first overload will run out at the end of the first wave, you then use the second wave to stack overload again, which gets you overloaded when the boss spawns. Remember, this will be different for many of you, so make sure to adjust your runs either by keeping her in Luvia form longer so you get overloaded sooner, or switch to Ray early in the run to make sure you won't be overloaded too soon. If Luvia is your main DPS, practicing her animation cancels is highly recommended. I'm currently working on a more in-depth and general guide for animation cancels, so I won't go into too much detail here, but in order to animation cancel Luvia's attacks, you need to move her while she's throwing the spear. While learning, I recommend aiming for the time her lightning spear flashes, and keep an eye out for my future video where I explain how this timing can change. And remember, you should always use your exclusive Crimebrand when the boss gets core broken. For a more supportive role, as she has in the Irene mining strategy, she becomes slightly easier to use. In this strategy, you want to hit your overload slightly earlier in order to stack your execution debuff before Shackled walk into the arena ults. The stacks last for 10 seconds, so the window is quite generous. However, I once again recommend animation cancelling her after the core break, just to squeeze out as much damage as possible. Lastly, in both cases, remember to utilize her electrocution stacks to the fullest when using units that can detonate multiple at once. We talked about a lot here, so let's summarize what we went over. Luvia is incredibly strong when using Last Stand, constructing stable overload timelines, animation cancelling Ray, and using all of those tools in conjunction with her exclusive Crimebrand to deal absurd amounts of damage. But she can also take a more backseated role and support sinners like Irene. Luvia can easily be slotted in as a DPS for Maiden, however knowing when to unload her burst can be quite difficult, especially since she will often be sharing the spotlight with both Irene and Nox. Combining this with the hectic nature of the fight means you won't find a lot of time to animation cancel. My general recommendation is to draw a rough timeline for her to land her overload form during the break, and use her exclusive Crimebrand slightly earlier rather than later, focusing more on your Irene ults and your Nox cancels to boost your score. Pretty straightforward summary once again here. While Luvia is by no means ideal for Maiden, she functions perfectly fine on the team. Not a whole lot to say here, she isn't really worthwhile focusing on over Nox and Irene, but she's still perfectly reasonable to bring along. That's it for this very first case review. I hope you managed to learn something. If there's information you feel is missing, or there's a particular sinner you would like to see featured, let me know in the comments. I can't promise a review of all the units in the game, since I'm limited to my box and the time I've invested in them, but I'll do my best regardless. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope I'll see you in the next one.